Welcome to NTD and Epoch Times special coverage of the recall election in California. I'm Siamak Korami, and in the studio today I have Melina Weisskopf, who's NTD's Washington, D.C. correspondent. She's here to find out what's going on with the recall election in California. Melina, it's great to have you. Welcome.
Thanks, Siamak. Great to be here. It's interesting that such a deep blue state like California has over 1.5 million signatures on this petition to recall this Democratic governor, Governor Gavin Newsom. Can you tell us some of the leading candidates in this race?
Yes, the leader right now is Larry Elder, who's running as a Republican. He's a conservative radio host. Then we got Kevin Faulconer, who's running as a Republican, who's the former mayor of San Diego. Also, we have John Cox, who's running as a Republican, who has ran multiple times in the past, and last time in 2018 he lost to Governor Newsom. Then we have Kevin Kiley, who's a Republican assemblyman, California assemblyman. And then we have Kevin Patrick, who's running as a Democrat. He's a YouTube millionaire star, and he's only 29 years old. And they're all running against Governor Newsom.
Yeah, Governor Newsom, who's served California since 2019. He was elected in 2018. First, he served as the lieutenant governor of California from 2011 to 2019. Then he was the mayor of San Francisco from 2004 to 2011. So having been serving Californians for many years now, Siamak, do you think that Democrats are supporting Governor Newsom in this recall?
So there's a number of Democrats that actually do support Governor Newsom, and the reason they support Governor Newsom is because of the pandemic and the virus. They're afraid of the virus and they agree with the lockdowns, they agree with his approach. But then there is also a number of Democrats that are going to not support the recall. They're going to say no to the recall, but they don't like the governor as well. They don't support the governor, and they're waiting for the next election to have somebody else. But these people, they would not vote for a Republican. They're actually doing this because they don't want a Republican to win. And there's also another factor in this recall election is that the enthusiasm. The people that are on the recall side, they're very enthusiastic about the recall. The people that are against the recall, they're not that enthusiastic about Governor Newsom, especially because of the French Laundry incident.
And I know there was the mail-in ballots, right? That might give them more incentive to just vote. You know, they may not have had the enthusiasm, like you're mentioning, to want to go out to the polls and vote, but since they have the mailed ballots, they'll probably cast their ballot, right?
Yeah, we have talked to some people and that actually specifically told me because they're getting the mail-in ballots, it's easy and they will vote. Had it not been like that, they wouldn't go and vote for Governor Newsom. They wouldn't go out of their way to vote no on the recall, but now that it's coming to their house, they're going to be voting for it.
So Siamak, you've done ample research on these issues over the past couple of years. So what's actually fueling this recall? Can we break down some of the issues? For example, we know in San Francisco there are $60,000 spent per homeless tent every year, but there's still over 150,000 homeless people in the state, and it seems to just be getting worse.
Yes, and people are wondering where is the money going. A lot of us here in California want to help the people that are unfortunate or they're suffering. And there was actually a measure passed in LA called Prop HHH. It was a tax increase that gave $1.2 billion to homeless and wanted to build housing. The idea was that they would build 10,000 units to house homeless people. To date, the money has gone and we haven't built even 1,000.
Wow.
So you wonder the discrepancy, and the mayor of LA is talking about soft costs and the challenges that they're having, and there's some nonprofit entities involved. People are wondering where the money is going. And there's another factor is that it seems like the policies are not hitting the root cause. A lot of experts I've talked to, they're talking about addiction, mental illness, and this is being the root cause of the homelessness, and solving that could get an individual back on their feet, or having a mental illness institution where you can have a long-term solution for somebody, getting them off the street. But what the state has done with the housing first policies, like people can't do anything until we can house them. And this policy has enabled some special interests, people that are in the housing industry, to come in and try to build houses. And the funding is going to build housing, and apparently they're very expensive houses.
Yeah, that sounds like a really tough issue. I mean, we see it. I mean, our reporters at NTD have gone across the state and interviewed people, residents, California residents, to see what they're thinking about this.
Water pollution from the camps is also an issue, and they are especially concerned about children walking past.
This is a student's walk to George Shirakawa Senior Elementary in the Rock Springs neighborhood.
Since the pandemic, Venice Beach has been crowded with an increased number of homeless encampments, resulting in fires, trash, and crime.
This is what we encounter every single day, and most residents are starting to fear for their safety. It's not safe to be on the boardwalk, especially after dusk.
The boardwalk became a sanctuary zone under LA Council member Mike Bonin, but residents and business owners are calling on law enforcement to address the issue.
Based on when we collaborate and find out what needs need to be met, we can bring additional resources to address those needs, and it's a quite comprehensive situation. And then outreach continues to satisfy those needs to assist someone to transition out of homelessness.
And many candidates also have these proposals for how to end homelessness in California. In particular, I want to point out Kevin Pathrath, because many people have looked at his issue. Some have called them extreme. He wants to bring in the National Guard. So I know you did an interview with him, right, about what he wants to do.
Yeah, let's listen to what he's saying. He wants to end it in 60 days, but let's listen.
First thing we've got to do is no more homeless living on our streets within 60 days. The way we're going to do that is we are going to build 80 emergency facilities throughout the state. So they're accessible facilities everywhere. And these emergency facilities, think of them like high schools, able to hold 2,000 individuals each. We might take over abandoned malls or commercial buildings because there are plenty of them after COVID. And so what we're going to do in these is we're going to centralize support for homeless folks. That's education, mental health services, substance abuse services. We have a mental health crisis in this state. It's unaffordable. It's impossible to get mental health support. Wait times are ridiculous. We're going to solve that. So not only are we going to build these facilities, but we're going to provide services to homeless on the streets now so we can transition them after 60 days to our emergency facilities. After 60 days, nobody lives on our streets anymore. So after 60 days, no one's sleeping and trying to live on our streets because people are dying on our streets. That means we get tourism back. That means we get safety and security back. That means we also have less services and less money being wasted on services like EMS, police, fire. We've got a lot of money. We've got a revolving door of homeless going through our emergency facilities or through, well, the existing emergency systems. They cost a lot of money. They go to the emergency room, taxpayers end up footing the bill for that, and it's very, very expensive. So we've got to fix homelessness on our streets. The next thing we got to do is we got to minimize people becoming homeless. And so in my opinion, we do that with something I call future schools. Future schools are new schools that we're going to create where 16-year-olds have the opportunity to opt into a future school. They'll still have the option to get accredited so they could still go to a UC or Cal State if they want to. But a future school will teach financial education, high school education, a college education, and a vocational education all in one in 2 years. So that way folks at 16 can choose, well, I want to become an electrical engineer, a nurse, a computer programmer, whatever. They're going to graduate at 18, debt-free, for free, and with a career.
So let's break it down real quick. These candidates have different proposals. Let's look at kind of what they are. So we just heard from Kevin Pathrath, who says he wants to use emergency powers to create emergency housing for all homeless people to end homelessness within 60 days of taking office. He also wants to centralize medical and substance services, and he wants to put mental health at the core of his proposal. Also wants to include educational support, free meals, 3 meals per day, showers, hygiene, food supplies, medical supplies, whatever they may need, bringing in the National Guard to serve the homeless communities during the first 60 days that he proposes.
Now, Kevin Faulkner, he wants to clean up the public spaces and no camping, not allow any camping, public camping. He also wants to have more services, mental illness services and addiction treatments. He wants to open up hundreds of safe beds and long-term housing so that to offer it to the homeless.
And then John Cox, that Republican candidate who has ran for governor many times, his proposal is to put treatment at the heart of this. He wants to shift the funding that's going to housing and put that towards treatment. He also wants to use courts to force homeless people to receive mental health treatment.
Now, Larry Elder wants to actually get rid of CEQA, suspend CEQA, which is CEQA is a law that doesn't allow a lot of developers to build housing in California. He wants to suspend CEQA and actually make this call it a state emergency and build a lot of low-cost housing. And he's taking the Ben Carson's way of dealing with the homelessness.
And then we have Kevin Kiley, who is that state assemblyman, also a Republican, who says he wants to address the underlying causes. So he also wants to address mental illness and drug addiction. But another thing he wants to do is transition people into permanent housing.
You know, Melina, we have done a lot of interviews on this issue because this is a very big issue for our state. And of the experts I've talked to, there are some of them that operate in the shelter services. And Andy Bale is somebody that actually runs a rescue mission in LA, and he has 20 years of experience helping the homeless. He came on the show, and this is what his recommendation was with dealing with the homelessness.
Yes, I think the biggest common denominator of homelessness, people experiencing homelessness, I say now people devastated by homelessness, is the complete family breakdown. And that means there are people turning to drugs. There are people losing their mental health, and more than I've ever seen. People are displaying severe mental health challenges, and that's not just people devastated by homelessness. That's the general public is exhibiting severe mental health issues. And so that combined with a total wrong approach by our government. And when I say a total wrong approach, I mean that from federal government to state government to the county of LA to the city of LA, they are adopting a harm reduction approach, which requires us to allow drugs to freely flow. So I can say that if you take money from the city or the county, you have to allow alcohol and drugs to freely flow in your building. And that's why Union Rescue Mission is focused on recovery, focused on life transformation. Drug addiction is running rampant, and most people suffering from homelessness, whether the addiction led them to the streets or whether the streets caused them to turn to a drug to escape the hell on earth that it is, we won't deal with homelessness until we begin to deal with the addiction and we begin to promote recovery. But we're not promoting recovery. It's not even hardly mentioned anymore. I just learned this week that the cartels who really run Skid Row, they provide cheap meth, right, to the local gangs who distribute the cheap meth for the cartels. The cartels added fentanyl because fentanyl makes you sicker trying to get over an opioid addiction than meth ever did. And here you have our federal government, our state government, our city and county cooperating with the cartels by allowing the free flow of alcohol and drugs. So is there any wonder why we have more people devastated by homelessness? And it's growing at an exponential rate. It's like a free fall. And no matter what money you add, it's not going to be enough.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
There's reporting that can be trusted. There are programs that can inspire every generation. There is a television network worth watching and sharing. Our commitment is to bring you the facts and to show you the world. We won't be divided by politics, and we won't be swayed by the dollar. We believe in the strength of our nation and the hope in our shared humanity. We are NTD Television, and we are proud to bring you news you can trust and programs that make you smile. NTD Television, news you can trust. Everything that's reported on television isn't always true, but it should be. NTD, the power of truth. Now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.
And you know, when it comes to the homelessness, there's an element of criminal in it. A lot of people think homelessness, you know, encampments, these are poor people, they're suffering. There's an element of that in there. But unfortunately, based on my studies and research, there is an element of gangs that are trying to control these encampments. They're selling drugs to people. I've had a chance to sit down with a LAPD officer who serves in Skid Row. He told me that each street in Skid Row is controlled by a gang. And what these gangs do is, for the homeless people that live in that street, just to have a tent, you either have to sell their drugs for them, hold their weapons, allow prostitution in your tent, or if you don't want to do anything with that, you have to pay them. So for you to have a tent in Skid Row as a homeless, you have to pay taxes to a gang.
So I hear this term Skid Row a lot. What exactly is this?
So Skid Row is an area in LA of 50 blocks where most of the services for homeless people are there. So homeless shelters, food, whatever you need is in Skid Row. And the idea was that they would have all of these services there, so when people lose their homes, or if people come out of prison and they have nowhere to go, they go there and they get the services.
Wait, so is this like a government-ran organization? How did Skid Row start? Because of the way it sounds, if there's like health, you know, if there's medical services and it's a place where the homeless community knows to go. Who started that? You know, how does that?
Well, I think it came together by a number of these facilities going there. It became the community. And the idea is that people will go there and they will get housing there, but a lot of times people get housing, but they also have tents. Sometimes the housing is not available. Sometimes certain facilities, they don't allow drugs in there, so people want to do drugs, so they come on the streets, but they also have access to showers and food, and you know, there's all these elements involved.
I mean, has the government said anything about this? Do they have any comments on this issue? Like, are they trying to do anything to clean up the area? Do they even think it needs to be cleaned up? What is their response to that?
From what I'm gathering, they've pretty much given up on it. That's what we are seeing. It seems like they want to just spend money to support these shelters, and from what we are hearing, they're not prosecuting any of these gangs, you know, and what the police officers I've talked to and the law enforcement people that I've talked to, they've actually told me that their hands are tied, they can't do anything about it.
And one of those witnesses, like you were mentioning, was
Dion Joseph, who's the officer, LAPD officer. Let's listen to the interview I had with him about crime and homelessness. Can you explain how does it work? You mentioned gang members are taxing people. How does it work for people that go to Skid Row?
A lot of people don't know this. People are sold a 30,000-foot view of what Skid Row is, and they think it's just some poor guy shaking a cup for change. That's not true. Skid Row is a recovery zone, right? And it's called a recovery zone because, once again, they have 108 programs. And because it's centralized, but it's also adjacent to other cities in LA County, it attracts two groups of people. People who are disenfranchised, who are in desperate need of help, who can't get it anywhere else because of NIMBYism. But it also attracts the criminal element who knows many of the people who are struggling there suffer from addiction. So what happens is gang members, they've been there for decades, you know. They take over blocks, they take over the parks, and they basically divvy up territory. and they claim the blocks as their own. And what they do is, if you try to set up a tent on the block and you don't have their permission, you know, they're going to say, hey, look, you either sell our drugs, hold our guns, let our women use your tents for human trafficking, or you pay taxes. And if you don't do any of that, you have to leave. There was a couple who had to pay their entire Social Security check to a particular gang in the area. That's the life that many of these individuals have to lead. And many of them end up being forced to be involved in the criminal element, or others become willing participants because they have addictions themselves. So to get their addictions satisfied, they agree to work with the criminal element there. And it just creates this environment that's basically can easily be compared to Dante's Inferno. Crazy story. We had one lady who stayed at a newer hotel, and because she refused a drug dealer who was selling her drugs in her hotel room, she had just got off the streets, just wanted to get her life back. Because she refused him, basically at 2 o'clock in the morning, she went out to smoke a cigarette and she was assaulted by gang members because she refused to buy the drugs. So these are the things that the general public don't understand when you allow a hands-off approach, when you tie the hands of law and order, even in a place called Skid Row. And it's spreading everywhere. And I said this in 2007. I said, as Skid Row goes, so goes the rest of the county and the state and everything else. And it's happening at a rapid pace, because now Skid Row is so dangerous. It's too dangerous to be homeless in Skid Row.
You know, when we hear about these gangs controlling the homeless encampments and extorting money and selling drugs, overall the state has taken a very relaxed approach on crime. And across the state, we see crime is on the rise.
This Twitter video posted by radio host Adam Carolla has gone viral. The video shows two people casually walking out of a store carrying stolen clothes.
On Monday, a thief stole a garbage bag full of items from the shelves of a Walgreens store in San Francisco. An ABC reporter, security guard, and another woman also caught the robbery on camera.
Cell phone video footage shared on Twitter shows 10 people running out of the store carrying handbags. The thieves are then seen entering getaway cars, waiting for them outside the store. A recall election candidate remains critical of Newsom.
What has Gavin Newsom done about it? He supported decriminalizing theft and gave early release to tens of thousands of violent criminals.
And the state has taken an approach that's relaxed to crime. And there's three aspects to this. One is the decriminalization. The second one is actually defunding the police. And the third one is that we have these district attorneys in Los Angeles and San Francisco that don't want to prosecute crime. They're very soft on crime. And on top of that, we have certain laws that we as residents voted for, such as Prop 47, Prop 57. Prop 47 is a law that is controversial now. A lot of people are complaining about it, especially in the law enforcement field. It was branded as safe neighborhoods and safe schools. Sheriff Villanueva, who's the sheriff of LA County, here's what he told me about Prop 47.
Trust me, criminals are retooling what they do based on that. Right now, when they did Prop 47, numerous scientific studies showed that it did increase the rate of property crimes, Prop 47, because it decriminalized a lot of block property crimes. And now we have people who go into stores shopping, knowing that just get below the 950 limit, and they just walk out and don't even bother paying for it. People at restaurants. In fact, I talked to a restaurant owner in the City of Commerce just the other night. He says every single night, and this is a decent, you know, not a ultimate high-end scale restaurant, but a decent one where you can get a good steak, dinner. He says at least once a night, I have an entire table. They'll pick up and say, "Hey, we're not paying." And they just walk out on them.
Wow.
And stiffs him for a bill of $200 or $300 every single night, because they know that they don't face a lot of consequences when they do it. So that impacts everybody.
Oakland Police Chief LaRon Armstrong spoke about the impacts of cutting $17 million from the Oakland Police Department's budget. Armstrong said he felt challenged by the decisions made last Thursday when the Oakland City Council voted to redirect police funding to violence prevention programs.
Our shootings are up over 70% this year. Our robberies are up 11% this year. It's been 1,300 robberies in this city already this year. Our carjackings are up nearly 88%. So we see clearly that crime is out of control in the city of Oakland, and our response was for less police resources.
He said starting July 1st, there won't be extra officers for public safety.
And Melina, Larry Elder has been the candidate that has been actually very vocal about Prop 47. Let's listen to this.
So now we're diverting $150 million from the LAPD for youth programs that we wouldn't have needed had the family not been destabilized by liberals. And this assault on the police, it's called the Ferguson effect, CMAC, or the George Floyd effect. And that is this phenomenon of accusing police officers of engaging in systemic racism, of using force more forcefully against blacks than against whites. It's not true. There's a big article in the Washington Post. I always like to cite liberal publications when I can. Big article in the Washington Post, April 27, 2016. I know the date because that's my birthday. A long article about all these studies going back over decades showing the police more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. Same year, July of 2016, cover story in the New York Times about a Harvard economist named Roland Fryer. He's black. He's so brilliant, he's Harvard's youngest tenured professor in its history. And Harvard is the oldest college in America. That's how brilliant he is. And because of the high-profile killings and deaths of people like Michael Brown in Ferguson and Eric Gardner in New York and Tamir Rice in Cleveland and Freddie Gray in Baltimore, he just knew the police were using deadly force disproportionately against black people just because they're black. So he did a study. He said it was the most shocking finding of my career. Not only was it not true, the police were more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. Now, you're a cop, no matter what your race, and you're tooling around because much of police work is discretionary. You can choose to get out of the car and look at something suspicious if you want, but what's the upside? The upside is the more interactions you have, the more likely it is you're going to be accused of engaging in systemic racism. So cops are pulling back, and they're engaging with what's called passive policing as opposed to proactive policing. Bad guys know it, crime goes up, and the people who are disproportionately hurt are black and brown people, the very ones that the left claims that they care about.
And something actually that Larry Elder is campaigning on, which I find is interesting, is that he wants to recall some of those district attorneys that are not prosecuting crimes. I know, and there's two
Yes,
two
there
areas.
There's actually two district attorneys. One of them is for San Francisco, and another one is from Los Angeles. And both of them are facing recall. Right now in California, we have a recall fever. There's a lot of recalls going on. And these district attorneys, they're facing a big backlash in their own departments, and they don't want to prosecute crime. And also families of people that have been victims have big concerns about their loved ones that they had lost to criminals. And now these district attorneys, they want to let these criminals out or be very easy on them.
So what is Larry Elder's proposal? What is the situation behind that? Like, he just wants to completely take them from their positions, or he's campaigning on this? He's the only candidate that's campaigning on it.
Yes, they want to recall them so that they will be replaced by other district attorneys.
Now, is that something that the governor can do? The governor has the authority to just take them out of their positions?
No, he's just supporting them. I believe that's what he's doing because they're elected officials, from what I understand.
So he's pretty much calling on the citizens to petition the DA's recall.
Yes.
While we're going through a recall.
And there's already a recall going on for both of them.
Oh,
there's a petition going around for district attorney in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And the sheriff of Los Angeles is also supportive of the district attorney recall.
Okay, interesting. So I think next we should go into the water and fire and drought issues. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back with more for you on that.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
There's reporting that can be trusted. There are programs that can inspire every generation. There is a television network worth watching and sharing. Our commitment is to bring you the facts and to show you the world. We won't be divided by politics, and we won't be swayed by the dollar. We believe in the strength of our nation and the hope in our shared humanity. We are NTD Television, and we are proud to bring you news you can trust and programs that make you smile. NTD Television, news you can trust. Everything that's reported on television isn't always true, but it should be. NTD, the power of truth. Now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.
Summer is here and the water supply is running dry in California. The state's drought claimed 9 more counties after Governor Newsom signed emergency proclamations on Thursday.
Unable to obtain or afford water, some almond growers have stopped irrigating their orchards, letting the trees die.
The Santa Clara Valley Water Board of Directors decided to charge residents of the county more in order to keep underground water at normal levels. The average water bill may see an increase of 9% per month. That's about $4.30 to $4.82 more.
So another issue facing California is a water shortage. We know this has been coming up in the news a lot. Matt, can you tell us more about why this is an issue here?
Yeah, you know what's happened is in California, what we've done is we have focused on conservation. The policy has been around, let's conserve what we have, which is not bad. But at the same time, we've had a big population growth, and we haven't really built supply, which is like we haven't built any reservoirs, we haven't built any new dams. It's been 50 years since we built any serious water infrastructure like a big dam. And I've had multiple guests on the show, which I want to bring them in, and you can take a look at what their thoughts are on this.
It's a supply and demand issue from my perspective. And unfortunately, most in the state only focus on the demand side. They don't want to focus on the supply side. The average supply for the state is pretty consistent. On an average year, about 200 million acre feet of water hits the state. About 100 million of that goes right back into the environment, so you really can't touch that. So you're left with really 100 million acre feet of usable or water that can be developed. Of that 100 million, 50 million is taken it right off the table and told you can't use this. This is for the fish. This is for the rivers, the streams, for the environmental purposes. And then you have 40 million acre feet for agriculture. That's very important. We historically have been the breadbasket for the world. To me, growing our own food is a national security issue. If you look what we learned with the Wuhan virus, we didn't develop our own pharmaceuticals. We didn't manufacture them anymore, so we were short of those. So we need to be solid on the food side. But then when you get to what the humans consume, recreation for manufacturing consumption, it's 10 million acre feet. It's a very small amount. And so we have that amount that hits the state every year. We just don't store enough.
So CMAC, who seems to be impacted the most from this water shortage that you're seeing?
It is mainly the farmers. You know, we've been told as consumers to conserve as much as we can, but really the people that are impacted the most are the farmers. Their shares have been cut, and some of them they cannot grow because of this water shortage.
Before the Delta smelt thing came up about 12 years ago or so, we were getting an average of about 70% delivery out of the aqueduct. And now after the Delta smelt, we're having 25 to 30% delivery. This year we got 5. But what are they doing with that water? They're flushing this year 75% of it to the ocean. Of the total water coming out of the Delta, 75% is going to the ocean. That is a problem. It's a political problem.
So this seems like a pretty intense issue. I mean, you talk about water shortage, so why are people in California putting up with this?
You know, what's interesting is that people in California, especially on the water, they have voted for a proposition, Prop 1, to actually build infrastructure for water. We have all voted for it, and we have put $8.2 billion aside to build this infrastructure, but it hasn't happened. There's another thing going on in California that most Californians believe that climate change has an impact on this. And because of that, they don't connect the drought issue of water shortage to actually the state policies.
Right, the policies that are more for climate protection.
Yeah, so what they see is that they will look at the drought and they don't pay attention to, okay, we didn't build any supply. We're not asking for accountability. What happened to that $8 billion we voted on? We wanted to build this infrastructure, but nothing has been built. Only $250 million have been used out of the $8 billion that was assigned for that infrastructure. But when we have drought, what we do is we just say, okay, we can't do anything about this. This is climate change. Another factor is fires. You know, when we have fires, the fire season, somebody was joking about this and saying, like, in California we have 5 seasons now, and fire season is the 5th one.
Oh no.
You know, and what's happened is that people think like this is climate change. You know, of course we're going to have fires because there's global warming. We're not connecting the issues to the state, and we can look into these Dixie fires. It was a big fire, and the approach the state has taken to managing forests is very questionable. And we have some experts that on the show that have commented on this.
I actually get a kick out of it when people say that wildfires are caused by global warming, because wildfires are caused by catastrophic wildfires, that is, are caused by an overabundance of fuel. And what I mean by that is too much vegetation, too many trees, too many bushes. So a lot of people go to the forest and they say, this is beautiful, I love the forest, and they're seeing a density of trees that looks almost like a rainforest, and they think that's natural because that's what they're visiting. But long ago, before people got here, forests looked much different, more like a park. And for instance, when I lived in Lake Arrowhead, the ideal or natural amount of pine trees per acre was 50 trees per acre. And up there, when I lived up there, it was about 200 trees per acre. A little bit of that has changed. So in our history, we've had some catastrophic things happen. Because of droughts and things, we've had infestations of the bark beetle. I don't know if you've ever heard about the bark beetle, but back in the early 2000s, the bark beetle did a lot of damage to our forests because of drought. So because there's the soil's like a sponge and it only has so much water. It can support the 50 trees, right? But as it has more and more trees, up to 200 on an acre, that sponge of water is getting depleted and the trees are getting weaker. So these bugs would attack the trees, make them die, and now all of a sudden we have this even more fire danger within our forests. And that went on all over California, and in 2004 we had a lot of catastrophic wildfires just because of that, because we weren't thinning our forests.
Good evening, thanks for joining us.
There's reporting that can be trusted. There are programs that can inspire every generation. There is a television network worth watching and sharing. Our commitment is to bring you the facts and to show you the world. We won't be divided by politics, and we won't be swayed by the dollar. We believe in the strength of our nation and the hope in our shared humanity. We are NTD Television, and we are proud to bring you news you can trust and programs that make you smile. NTD Television, news you can trust. Everything that's reported on television isn't always true, but it should be. NTD, the power of truth. Now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.
And another issue we know many of these candidates are running for problems to solve is education. So we know that many people in California, parents have spoken out about issues they've seen in the education system, whether that be Newsom's policies on the lockdown or some just curriculum issues during the past couple of years, right?
Yeah, there's a deeper issue here with education. You know, if you look at education in California, we're spending, some people argue, almost half of our budget, state budget, on education. And we are getting 50% of kids in California can't read at grade level. 60% of kids in California, there's some surveys, can't do math at grade level. And we're spending a lot of money on it. And what's happened is that education is become a monopoly. Public schools, the way it works is that you don't really have a choice. If you're living in a neighborhood, you have to send your kids to a public school that's designed for that neighborhood, that's assigned to that neighborhood, and you don't have a choice outside of that, no matter how bad that school is performing. So there are some neighborhoods that have really bad schools. And the main factor to this has been the unions, the teacher unions. They have a lot of influence, and they're not allowing the charter schools and choice to come into it. And you mentioned Gloria Romero. She's the Democrat Senate Majority Lead that's campaigning with Larry Elder, and one of the reasons she's doing that is because she's pro-school choice. And Larry Elder has been the candidate that has been really pushing school choice because apparently he has had personal experience going to a school that had a very low proficiency rate in math and English.
And right now in California, as it is in most states, it is essentially a government monopoly. It's decided by zip code, so that a child, depending upon where they live, some unnamed government bureaucrat in a district that basically has been gerrymandered into lines that nobody really understands, looks at the address, looks at the zip code, and tells a family this is where you can go or can't go to get an education. This is how we run public education in California. And if you think about it, we don't do that anywhere else. And those chronically underperforming, failing schools, sadly, are disproportionately cited in high poverty, low income, predominantly minority, black and brown communities. And so that's where I came in saying, it's not a fair chance. We need to change the system, and we should not trap kids in schools that we know are just failing year after year.
About 300 parents and kids, many wore yellow t-shirts that say, "Decreasing the distance." They are calling for full reopening of schools.
I miss my teachers and I miss my friends.
We are speaking on behalf of our kids. Our kids need to be going to school. Whatever it takes to get them there, that's what needs to happen.
Her daughter Olivia misses in-person learning.
I was really upset because I wasn't able to see my friends.
Social aspect of school is huge. You know, at kids, young kids especially, and high school kids especially. Just think back, how much of high school was social for you?
What is our plan B? You know, what options do we have? Is it private schools? Is it moving? Is it, in many cases, is it moving outside of the state?
And on the education issue, there is another concern that parents have, and some people have in the state of California, on critical race theory and these ethnic studies. A lot of these schools are starting to introduce ethnic studies, and some of these curriculums, some of these classes are a little bit controversial. Some of the candidates, like Kevin Kiley, as you had done some research on Kevin Kiley, he's introduced this, he wants to ban CRT, right?
Yeah, I think Kevin Kiley's also, he used to be a high school teacher too, so that brings in a personal factor of what he's trying to do, why he's so passionate about this. So we know that's one of the things he's campaigning on, is he wants to ban critical race theory, he wants to promote school choice and revive civic education. So some of the reporters here, we have here at NTD's California team, did an interview with Kevin Kiley to see what his proposals are in fixing the education system here in California.
The problem with the CRT is it goes directly against what an education should be about, where we teach kids how to have the critical thinking skills that they need in order to build their own identity and worldviews for themselves. What CRT does is it seeks to impose those things on them. It takes away their ability to form their own individual identity, and what's more is it teaches them how to tear down their communities, whereas what we should be doing is teaching kids how to build up their communities, teaching them about America's founding ideals, the ideals that have made this the greatest country in the world. So what I want to do is not merely stop CRT, but actually revive true civic education in our education system.
Another thing that we've seen here is that parents are frustrated over Governor Gavin Newsom's lockdown policies. We know kids were out of school for a little over a year here, just like they were in many other states. So that just, I think, in some way fueled the frustration and kind of motivated them to get out and contribute to the recall here.
Yeah, and you know, the teacher unions, the organization I mentioned, they have a lot of power here in California, and they wanted to negotiate what they wanted. That caused some frustration for the parents. There's certain data, it's safer for kids to go to school. Some parents believe that that's the right way to do it, that they should have opened up the schools. And also the working class, people that work, and both parents are working, and they have to go out of the house and work in a restaurant or a coffee shop or places like that. It is very hard on them when the kids are not at school, and that's another factor. Sometimes even the teachers felt that as well. When teachers were teaching on Zoom and they had their own kids at home, they had to take care of their kids and teach as well.
Right.
So this has been a factor for people.
Walmart, Costco, Target, they're allowed to open, but if you own a small business or a small store, you're closed down under this color tier program the governor has, and it's not fair.
But we did build a beer garden out there and an outside bar, and that was super popular. But we can't even use that now in California. There's no outside seating. You bring your employees in, and they shut you down, and you lose your employees. So, and we have a hard time getting employees up here anyway because of the cost of living.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
There's reporting that can be trusted. There are programs that can inspire every generation. There is a television network worth watching and sharing. Our commitment is to bring you the facts and to show you the world. We won't be divided by politics, and we won't be swayed by the dollar. We believe in the strength of our nation and the hope in our shared humanity. We are NTD Television, and we are proud to bring you news you can trust and programs that make you smile. NTD Television, news you can trust. Everything that's reported on television isn't always true, but it should be. NTD, the power of truth. Now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.
So all these issues are at the top of people's minds when they're voting on whether or not to keep Gavin Newsom in office or replace him. So what do you think is going to happen? You think he's going to actually leave and be replaced?
You know, it's tough to say because it seems like it's a 50-50, people are split. But one thing I can tell you is that as Californians, something that we have to address is this division. It seems like we're very divided. And the division has come to a point where we don't want to talk to each other. We don't want to bring logic and discuss our ideas. And this is something we need to do because for us to do well in the future, whoever wins this gubernatorial race, we as Californians need to come together and bring different ideas. These issues are serious. We're going to be in trouble if we continue going this path. So we need to come together and work together to resolve.
He frees numerous convicts and felons under the auspices of the pandemic, putting dangerous felons and freeing prisons, putting them on the street. We have the highest taxes, one of the highest taxes in the nation.
Everything he's mandated isn't right. We don't have, America is about freedom of choice.
The main thing is that there's a lot of small businesses that are gone in this state. We locked down California.
I haven't voted yet. I have not sent in my ballot. I have it at the house. I've liked what he's done so far. However, there is some very, very strong points of argument regarding the homelessness, regarding the his need for flair.
I already voted as soon as the ballot came out. I think it was a waste of money. He only had 1 year left.
I understand, Gavin Newsom definitely did something that's just, not making sense or not reasonable. But I don't think that leads to the recall.
This is a big moment for Californians. And last time a recall like this went through, it was 2003. And David Lamb, our reporter, has put a story together on the recall in 2003.
Governor Gavin Newsom faces criticism over the way he handled the COVID pandemic, crime, and more. This is the second recall election in the state's history. The first was in 2003 when Arnold Schwarzenegger replaced incumbent Gray Davis. In an interview with CNN, Schwarzenegger draws similarities between this year's recall to that of 2003.
The atmosphere is exactly the same when I ran. It's the same kind of things like where the people talk about blackouts, where people are not happy with education, where people are not happy with what's going on with the inequality in the state.
The 2003 recall effort began in February of that year when anti-tax activist Ted Costa announced a petition to recall Davis. Californians blame Davis for the electricity crisis and rolling blackouts, among other issues, which led to his recall. In March 2003, people began collecting signatures to recall Davis. Despite a slow start, recall advocates submitted over 110% of the required signatures by July, and a recall election was set for October 7th. Throughout the recall process, Davis characterized the effort as a partisan mischief by a handful of right-wing politicians. Today, Governor Newsom uses a similar message, characterizing the 2021 recall as a Republican recall. After nearly 3 months of campaigning, Schwarzenegger was declared the new governor on election night.
Thank you so much for being here tonight.
By 10 p.m. local time, Davis conceded that he had lost the election. NTD talked to Randy Economy, a political consultant who personally knew Davis. Economy looks back on his time during the 2003 recall.
And I, lived around the corner from Gray Davis in West Hollywood. And I used to tell Gray all the time when we'd run into each other at the supermarket, you better pay attention to this recall because it's a real thing. And he laughed at me. And everybody within the Democratic Party laughed at me and says, oh, you can't take those crazy people serious. You can't take Arnold Schwarzenegger serious. No, that's a bunch of, fringy kooks who are actually trying to go ahead and steal an election.
Economy told NTD he used to be part of the Democratic Party.
Well, on election night, I sat literally 5 feet from Gray Davis with tears rolling down his face and his wife's face, and everybody in that room had looked like they had just, been taken to the worst funeral of their lives.
In the 2003 recall, 55.4% of voters voted for Davis to be recalled. About 45% said no. That's nearly 5 million yeses and 4 million noes. The top two replacements were Lieutenant Governor Cruz Bustamante and Schwarzenegger. Bustamante garnered nearly 32% of votes, while Schwarzenegger won over 48% of votes. He was later dubbed the name Governator, a reference to the actor's Hollywood films. Recall election ballots ask voters to answer two questions. One, should the current governor be recalled? And two, who should replace him? Today, Californians are voting whether or not to recall Governor Newsom. If the recall is successful, a new governor will be instated on October 22nd and finish the remainder of his term. Otherwise, Newsom will continue in his role until January 22nd, 2023.
Welcome back to Epoch Times and NTD's live coverage of the recall election in California.
Yes, C-Mac, so the polls just closed shortly, 20 minutes ago, right at 8 p.m. We had some reporters across the country go out to the polls and see how voters are feeling on this very special day in California.
I care about schools, okay, and then I would like to see that you have a choice. Either you go to a private or you go to a public school, and I care about our kiddos.
Unemployment that they're giving to people because people are getting lazy. $300 a week to sit home and do nothing, and they enjoy that. They realize, well, I'm getting something for nothing. Somebody's got to pay for it. And it's on the backs of those that are willing to work.
I feel it's a waste of money, and I understand people have concerns about the governor, and maybe there's a lot of mixed opinions about masks, but I personally feel masks are important to keep us safe. I think it's good that he's keeping up the mandates, and I think we really need to focus our time, energy, and money on different issues at this moment than to worry about this recall.
We need to clean up this state. My wife's been here for her family's been here 4 generations, mine 3 generations. And we've seen things just, spiral downhill, and it's it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And we need some good leadership, some that are not corrupt and beholden to special interests such as unions, and mainly the unions, but unions and. That are beholden to the people and to businesses.
I don't believe in this recall election, so I support, I don't want any changes. I'm happy right now. And he's taking good care of our COVID in California, and we're all happy.
It needs to be done. I think we need to have someone that abides by the rules a little bit better and uses the system, how it's built, on being able to get a balanced outcome of what needs to be done.
Put your money in the right places for the right reasons. And there's a lot of politics involved, and when Newsom says one thing and then he does something different, it's huge. And I hope everybody sees that.
So just for a quick recap, we're still getting the results in right now, but just to recap how this actually works, if 50% of people who turn out to vote, 50% plus 1, vote to recall Gavin Newsom, he will be replaced by one of those candidates. And right now what we're seeing is that of those top candidates, Larry Elder is leading at 44.2%. And the top 5 candidates in order is Larry Elder, Kevin Paffrath, which is the Democrat YouTube star running for governor. Then we also have Kevin Faulconer, John Cox, and Brandon Ross. Now the top counties, these are the top counties that we need to watch for this recall election because these are crucial. These are the most populous counties in California right now. So first we have Sacramento County, which has a population, which has eligible voters, over 800,000 eligible voters just in Sacramento County. And just for a quick demographic on that county, the majority of them are white, with 52% of the population being white, and then the second most populous ethnic group is the Asians. That's at 16%. Now, in past elections, this group in Sacramento County voted half and half Democrat and half Republican. Now, for Santa Clara, there's 1.2 million eligible voters. The majority of that population is of Asian ethnicity. 43.1% is of Asian ethnicity. Now, the second most populous ethnicity in that group in Santa Clara is the white population. That's 31.5%. And most people in Santa Clara in past elections have voted Democrats in office. Now, the next county is Alameda County. 1.1 million eligible voters in Alameda County. The majority of that population is white at 38% white population. The second most is Asian. So what we're seeing is mainly Asians and white population here in California voting on this. In Alameda County, this group of people voted mainly for Democrats in the past. Moving on to another populous county in California, crucial vote here for the recall election, Contra Costa. So there's 700,000 eligible voters in Contra Costa. The majority of the population is white at 39%. The second most the second most
Asians are the second most group that live in Contra Costa County. There's 18.4%, and this is a Democrat county. Then we have San Francisco with almost about 900,000 eligible voters, and majority white, 41% white. And second most group is Asians. They have 33%, and this is a Democrat county.
For San Francisco. Now, as far as San Mateo, so we have
San Mateo, yeah.
San Mateo, sorry, Georgia native here. San Mateo has 500,000 eligible voters. The majority of that population is white, close to 50%. Second most populous is Asian. They usually vote Democrat as well. The next county is
Marin County, and there's 180,000 eligible voters. Majority are white, 77% white, and then the Hispanics are next with 15%, and this is a Democrat county. Now, these are all counties in Northern California, and we're going to move to Southern California now.
All right, in Southern California, Los Angeles has around 6 million eligible voters. The majority of that population in Los Angeles is Hispanic, at around 50% Hispanics there. Second most populous is 26% white. Now, Los Angeles voters usually vote for Democrats. Now, as for San Diego.
San Diego has 2.2 million eligible voters. Majority are white, 75% white, and then Hispanics are next, and with 30 and then we have half are going for. This is one of those counties that is going half Republican, half Democrat, roughly.
And then the next most populous county in Southern California is Riverside. So there's 1.5 million eligible voters in Riverside County. The majority of that population is white at 56%, and the second most populous ethnic group is Hispanics. That's 51% Hispanics in Riverside. They usually vote Republican. And keep in mind, this is interesting to point out, the fact that Riverside has the Hispanics are 50% of the vote, and they vote majority Republican. So that's actually interesting to point out here.
And Orange County is the next. It has 2 million eligible voters, and majority are white, and then the Latinos are second, and with 35% of the voters. And this is a Republican county.
And moving on to the last most populous county, which is really crucial for the vote here in California, San Bernardino County. San Bernardino. So there's 1.3 million eligible voters in San Bernardino. The majority of that population is white at 76%. Second most populous is Hispanic at 54%. That group in San Bernardino votes half and half Republican and half Democrat.
And then in the studio with us tonight, we have Craig Kashishian, who's a pollster. And Craig has been watching this election closely. He's been polling. Craig, what do you think of what's going on right now? Do you have any access to the stats? What are your thoughts?
Hi, CMOC. Thank you for having me on. I have public access, as anybody would, to data. We have polled privately on behalf of our groups, and we initially saw a very strong rate of enthusiasm for the recall in mid-August, and then we started to see that interest slack off over time. Unfortunately, that very trend line has continued, and as I speak to you now, the Democratic participation has been extraordinarily strong on the mail-in ballot side, strong as well on the Republican side on mail-in ballots to date. It's the independent / non-party preference voters that are lagging behind both the Republicans and the Democrats. And for the Republicans to prevail in this recall, for Larry Elder to prevail, he needs a very strong surge of support from independent and non-party preference voters. Republicans will fall into line, but the Democrats have also fallen into line. So that spells danger for Mr. Elder and the Republican candidates who are seeking to replace Governor Newsom.
Based on what you're seeing, is there any surprises for you? And how does the counting work? Do the people that sent the ballots in, Are those getting counted right now, or is there any process in the counting that we need to know about? Because from what we know, usually Republicans go vote and then Democrats would mail in the ballot.
Yeah,
right?
that's interesting. I think you pointed out, Craig, that you're seeing more mail-in ballots right now from Republicans. So that's an interesting point to point out.
Yes. The trend line is about 45%, 44% of all ballots mailed to Democrats and to Republicans have been returned by mail by Republicans and Democrats. Ballots mailed to independents and to non-party preference voters have not been as enthusiastically returned as Republican Party and Democratic Party voters have done. So they're about 33%. The Republicans are a point above the Democrats right as we speak. But this is what is important for our viewing audience to know. In the polling world where I was and have been for 40 years, I started off with President Reagan's polling team and came back to help President Trump and other well-known races of that ilk. I will tell you that voters who are angry and are really hopped up are the first ones to vote. That drives them, that enthusiasm, that vigor, that restlessness to demonstrate their upset disposition with the candidate always comes in first. So I would imagine that the numbers you're seeing pouring in as we speak come from male voters who were enthusiastic and resoundingly intent on getting their voices heard. So
point that out. You're saying the numbers we're looking at as we speak. So we just got the updated numbers here. There's 68.9% of the entire California population that turned out to vote has voted no to this recall. So they want to keep Governor Gavin Newsom in office, while 31% so far have voted yes. They would like to replace Governor Gavin Newsom with another candidate. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Craig, is the demographic areas that we're seeing that in California. Based on the demographics, we have Latino communities, we have Asian communities. Do you expect this vote? Do you expect those demographics to impact the vote in any way, and if so, in which ways?
I fully expect that the Latina, Asian, and Black communities will of course be Gavin Newsom's strongest bastion of power. But then again, I think significant chunks of those communities will also look to vote for the recall as well. So this may not fall along traditional lines. In fact, what we saw over the summer was something extraordinary. We saw up to 40% of Latinas, 40% of Blacks, 33% of Blacks, and 40% of Asians, all interested in tossing Mr. Newsom out. So that goes well beyond the natural contour lines for these communities. Whites will most likely split their vote. So Mr. Newsom really has to, Mr. Elder and company really have to pull a neat hat trick to pull this off.
Do you think this enthusiasm that from the Latinos and these minority groups, do you think this is going to come today?
Well, it may. The picture is still incomplete. We are just seeing the first crop of ballots coming through. It could be a very long night. In fact, it could be a very long few days because the state is so enormous in size and scope that people have up to tonight to still mail in their ballots. And of course, they still have the privilege to vote up to 8 p.m. tonight. So the whole complexion of this state's voting populace is still incomplete. We won't get a real good picture until very late tonight. But the trend lines are favoring the incumbent, the governor, to stay in power.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that we won't have, some people are saying maybe the result will come out quicker depending on how successful Governor Newsom is in getting those votes to keep him in office. But I think it's interesting to hear from you, somebody who studies this, that you're really anticipating it will take a long time, at least a couple of hours tonight before we can get any answer on this. It's interesting.
For sure. It's a difficult state to poll. It's a very difficult state to canvass because of the large size, the scope and the size, and the fact that we go county by county, and we have a lot of counties here in this great state of ours. So.
While you're mentioning the counties, we actually got some updated data breaking down the counties and the votes that we're seeing in those counties so far. So we see in Sacramento, 66% of people have voted yes to the recall. 34% have voted no to the recall. That's in Sacramento County. And the top candidate, if Newsom is replaced, that's preferred in that county, Sacramento, is Larry Elder.
Now, Santa Clara County is 78% yes and 22% no, and the top candidate is Larry Elder.
Now, as for Alameda County, so we got 15% have voted yes to the recall so far. 85% in Alameda County has voted no.
In Contra Costa, there's 68% that said yes and 24% that said no so far, and the top candidate is Larry Elder.
Right. Well, what you're looking at effectively are the two most polarizing counties, three of the most polarizing counties in the state. Alameda County is home to Oakland, very liberal, Berkeley, all that. So expect a very pro Governor Newsom vote in those counties. In these other counties outside of Sacramento, those are deep red districts, believe it or not. California is not as clean cut as it used to be, where the top half of the state was traditionally blue and the bottom half south of Santa Barbara was traditionally red all the way down to the Mexican border. That's all changed now. LA, Los Angeles County, for the most part, certainly Alameda and San Francisco and the Bay Area are always deep blue, but so is parts of Inland County like Riverside, and certainly parts of San Diego have gone very deep blue. So things have turned upside down and inside out in the state. Now you have pockets of red in Northern California. We didn't see those before, and now you have very deep pockets of blue in Orange County, for example, and LA, which used to be very red.
We're going to talk to some. We have some people, some of our reporters, in polling stations. We're going to talk to them, and we'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Here at a voting center in Santa Clara, people are casting their votes on Election Day. Let's hear what they have to say.
We need some good leadership, some that are not corrupt and beholden to special interests such as unions, and mainly the unions, but unions and that are beholden to the people and to businesses.
I don't believe in this recall election, so I support. I don't want any changes. I'm happy right now, and he's taking good care of our COVID in California, and we're all happy.
It needs to be done. I think we need to have someone that abides by the rules a little bit better and uses the system how it's built on being able to get a balanced outcome of what needs to be done.
Adding my voice to the whole to the public consensus, making sure that my opinion is well received, I suppose.
I'm Jackie Mulinax, and I'm here at one of the many voting centers open today in California. It's a very big week for California as we move further into this recall election, and it seems, whether for it or against it, it's a hot topic of conversation pretty much anywhere you go. Now, I've heard a lot of names today talking with people such as, front-running candidates like Kevin Kiley or Larry Elder, but I've also spoken with a few people who say they'd like to see Newsom continue. He's done his job and he deserves to finish out his term.
I want him to work more towards climate change and doing things about the forests and such and wildfires, but I think we cannot lose a Democratic voice, because I don't want us to be another Texas. I don't want us to be another Florida. I want women to have their own choice to make up their own minds about their bodies.
I'm excited that there's a recall in motion. I think Gavin Newsom has not been good for our state. I feel like he is hypocritical, and I'm excited that a lot of other Californians feel the same way.
There are also mixed responses in Southern California.
Yeah, I voted because I wanted to stop the this Republican recall, which I consider to be completely illegitimate. The election is like a year away, and now they wasted about $20 million of taxpayers' money.
I think it's a good way to hold politicians accountable, that they don't have ultimate power to do whatever they want, and that people, just because you're in office doesn't mean that you're not accountable anymore.
We need to stay like in democracy and in freedom to vote and to express our opinions as citizens.
Polls close at 8 p.m. It can take a few days for the results to be announced as the state waits for mail-in ballots to be counted. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
So a lot of mixed reactions out there as people were going to cast their ballots earlier today. So we're going to get back after a quick break. We'll see you soon.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
There's reporting that can be trusted. There are programs that can inspire every generation. There is a television network worth watching and sharing. Our commitment is to bring you the facts and to show you the world. We won't be divided by politics, and we won't be swayed by the dollar. We believe in the strength of our nation and the hope in our shared humanity. We are NTD Television, and we are proud to bring you news you can trust and programs that make you smile. NTD.
So just based on the results that we've got so far, the yes is 30% of voters are saying yes on the recall, and about 68.9% say no on the recall. In the studio today, we have Craig. Craig, what is there a specific county that we should be looking at?
Well, there are several bellwether counties: Los Angeles County, Orange County, of course, San Diego County, and I would look at Alameda County, and we will get some very strong contrasts. Now, if Mr. Newsom dominates everything south of Los Angeles, then there is no race. Orange County is pivotal for Mr. Elder's prospects. Los Angeles County, Riverside County, San Bernardino County, San Diego County all count for Mr. Elder. So he's got to really count on those counties to outperform the standard, which has been traditionally kind of split, if not weak for most Republican statewide candidates. So those are the big ones to look at. And they haven't come in yet. Orange County has not reported. I don't think San Diego County's reported yet.
Right. So actually we just got another update. This is moving pretty fast here. So 67.5% have voted no, they do not want to recall Governor Gavin Newsom. They want to keep him in office. Overall, that's overall throughout the state. 67% want to keep Governor Gavin Newsom in office. 32.5% are voting yes to the recall. They would like to replace him. Of course, of those people, as expected, the people who want to replace Governor Gavin Newsom, the majority is voting for Larry Elder, the conservative talk show host. So I wanted to ask, it seems like it's dividing a little bit more. It's getting a little bit more thinned out. More people are voting yes to no to the recall right now. So I'm just wondering, do you expect this trend to continue, Craig, or do you expect some of those people who went to the polls today, some of those numbers to show in shortly?
I think when Orange County and San Diego County and some of the inland counties start to chime in, Mr. Elder's percentage, actually the yes to recall factor will go up because those folks have yet to register their votes online and have those results reported. So when the counties and the precincts start to report those, I expect most of those votes to tilt toward the recall exercise. They will ask.
Momentum in the last couple of months with Larry Elder's, when Larry Elder came into the race. And is there any, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a very good point, CMOC. In fact, Larry Elder most likely electrified this race. This race was, I think, a folly. Most recalls tend to be. Very few recalls are successful. So the way we looked at this professionally over the last several months was that we thought that Newsom would prevail with ease, and there was no serious interest other than some very passionate people that wanted to see Gavin Newsom ousted. Well, as time wore on and as the effects of COVID lingered and the extraordinary measures in place to combat COVID by shutting down businesses and keeping kids out of school lingered, the reaction to ousting Newsom actually gained traction. All it needed was a real catalyst, and Larry Elder was exactly that. He was a lightning rod. And that's why you saw such a surge of interest in the recall, and that's when the polls really started to take on some momentum for the recall after Elder was able to get registered and become a viable candidate. So Larry Elder was the one who really electrified this race and electrified the Democrats to scramble and bring in big guns like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to campaign for him.
I wanted to ask you, I'm actually not so involved in California politics. I focus more on the national scale. So I wanted to know about Larry Elder's popularity in the Democrat counties. Do you think that he's drawn some support in some Democrat counties, some deep blue counties? Is that what you're seeing from some of the polls?
Well, from the polls, I did see that. I don't know whether they're going to match up with actual results just yet. But Mr. Elder has a very compelling story and appeals to a lot of folks who had to come up from the bootstraps like Mr. Elder did, and that resonates. And one of his big tenets is improving education by offering school choice, and that, again, resonates with a lot of ethnic families who want to get their kids out of the public school system into a better academic environment, and public schools, school choice, gives them that chance.
Craig, there's a phenomenon in California that some Democrats will never vote for a Republican, no matter what. Is this correct? Have you seen something like that, or in this recall? And then there's other thoughts that this recall, there are people that have gotten involved that were not political before. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's a good question too, and thanks. I can give you a very interesting example. I worked as a White House pollster to keep an eye on the George Deukmejian Tom Bradley race in 1982. And a lot of people thought that Tom Bradley, the Democrat, would knock off George Deukmejian with ease. We predicted that George Deukmejian, the Republican, would win the governorship, and we learned why. Because a lot of Democrats who hadn't voted since John F. Kennedy decided to vote for George Deukmejian because there was another ballot initiative on that ballot that was to control handguns, and they didn't want their gun rights compromised. So when they checked that box off, they decided to check off the Republican. So yes, they do split ballots. They still do, although I think political affiliation now is a lot more polarized. So 90% of Republicans will vote Republican, and it's fair to say 90% of the Democrats will vote Democrat.
Thank you so much, Craig, for that insight. We really appreciate that. So now we're actually going to move on and speak with one of our California correspondents who has been covering this recall in depth for the past couple of months. So we're going to meet in with him. David Lamb, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, Melina, I'm doing good. How are you?
Well, here. So we wanted to know what are some of the things that what are your insights on this after having covered this over the past couple of months? What are you thinking?
Yeah, Melina. So I've been covering it since it first started, and to be honest, when I first saw the logo of the Recall Gavin campaign, the red, yellow, and black, I didn't think much of it. It was a grassroots organization, and the organizers referred to themselves as Average Joes. So I didn't know if it was going to go anywhere. But they started having rallies and started getting more petitions, and rally after rally, they started having multiple rallies per week. And at that point, the petitions started gaining traction. And what really set them off was the COVID pandemic, because one, the court granted them an extension that increased their deadline, so they had extra time to meet the requirement. And along with that, people were just frustrated with the lockdowns, so they were kind of gathering together. And there was even a recall road trip where a group in Southern California just traveled throughout the state upwards to San Francisco and just setting up booths, getting extra petitions that way. So another thing is, along with the court ruling, other sectors and other areas were affected as well, such as churches. Churches had to be locked down and close their doors to their people who wanted to worship. So with that, some churches were actually fined thousands of dollars. And one church in my area in San Jose, the pastor got fined like $1 million. So after a couple of court cases, the court ruled in their favor, and the lawyers that were behind the case, they saw it as a win. And overall, it was just a win for the people that were trying to get Newsom out of office.
Hi, David. So I wanted to ask you about what you're seeing on the ground there, what you're seeing, overall. You've been interviewing people who are pushing for this recall. You've been encountering people who maybe not so enthusiastic about this. It sounds like the people who want the recall were more enthusiastic. Did you see, from what we're seeing so far with people wanting to keep Governor Gavin Newsom in office with those results we're seeing right now, is that surprising to you that the majority of the state so far has turned out to vote to keep him in office, or is that something you expected?
To be honest, I noticed at the beginning there was a lot of Republicans and people were just frustrated that they wanted to get him out of office. And again, it's with the pandemic. I think there's a flip side to it, because the question is, if there were people, or the people that wanted to keep Newsom in office, maybe they weren't allowed, maybe they didn't feel comfortable of going out to rally because of the pandemic. They wanted to stay inside and stay safe. So at the beginning, I've seen mainly people that were trying to kick Newsom out of office. But along the way, especially like when Larry Elder joined, more prominent figures, it started to kick off, and more Democrats started just speaking up and doing rallies. So actually the other day on Friday, I was trying to survey people just to get their thoughts on the recall. And believe it or not, like a handful of them, like almost all of them, said no, they don't plan on voting yes. And one guy was just kind of on the fence, but mainly they were saying that it's not worth it to recall him. He has about 1 year left. It's costly. It would cost millions of dollars. And some people just like what he's done. Like, for example, with the statewide lockdown that started last year, some people could see that as a form of leadership, just taking action when many other states in the United States didn't know what to do. It was a confusing time. So some people he probably garnered a lot of support that way. And I remember there was this one, he was encouraging people to even call the elderly people, their grandparents during that time, because people were lonely. They were stuck inside their houses. So he probably just gained a lot of, I'd say, respect or support that way.
About the French Laundry incident, do you think that impacted his popularity? significantly among some of those?
Yeah, with the French Laundry incident, people have called it a big form of hypocrisy. It's, he was implementing the tiered colored policy. So after that, when you have a lot of your constituents, you tell them not to go out, but then one day you get caught just hanging out with other people at the restaurant. People were just frustrated from that, and sometimes people actually look up to their policymakers or their leaders as a role model. So that definitely had an impact, because at almost every rally or every person that I talked to that wanted to kick him out, they always bring up the French Laundry.
A big point there. Thank you so much for that insight, David. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and we have some updated stats for you. So overall, statewide, 67.5% have voted no to the recall. They want to keep Governor Gavin Newsom in office. 32.5% have voted yes. So that number has changed just a little bit since we last checked in with you. But we're going to have a quick break, and we'll come back and update you some more as the results come in.
Everything that's reported on television isn't always true, but it should be. NTD, the power of truth. Now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
There's reporting that can be trusted. There are programs that can inspire every generation. There is a television network worth watching and sharing. Our commitment is to bring you the facts and to show you the world. We won't be divided by politics, and we won't be swayed by the dollar. We believe in the strength of our nation and the hope in our shared humanity. We are NTD Television, and we are proud to bring you news you can trust and programs that make you smile. NTD Television, news you can trust.
Welcome back to our live coverage of the special election recall here in California. So we have some updated stats for you. In Orange County, which is one of the crucial counties that we're looking at tonight, 42% of people have voted there so far. And of that 42% who have turned, with the votes that have been counted, 41% of them have voted yes to the recall. So close to half have voted yes, they would like to replace Governor Gavin Newsom, while 58% have voted no, they would like to keep Governor Newsom in office.
And Orange County is an important county because what happens in Orange County is going to impact, it's one of those counties that it has to, I think the recall has to be successful here for it to be successful across the state. Now in the studio we have Sean Steele, who was involved with the recall, with the 2003 recall. We can call him a recall expert. And we want to talk to him about what he thinks of this recall election. Sean?
Well, I had a lot to do with the last recall some 18 years ago, and it was a great pleasure. I had governors. California did it very nicely. A lot of good things came together, and you look at Gray Davis and his record then, and compared to Newsom, it's you know, Gray Davis looks like a very nice human being. Compared to Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom's had a series of bad luck, and Californians have really suffered. But the money has been quite a different story. The biggest supporter that he had some 18 years ago for Gray Davis was really the big labor. But now there's whole new elements of money in this particular election. And that includes not just big labor, particularly the California Teachers Association, which is a monstrous union. They can raise tens of millions of dollars with very little effort. And of course, they got a great thing going because they're able to get full salary and not have to teach school. And they've gotten away with that for a year and a half now. But there's also big Hollywood. And there's been a tremendous amount of money that entertainment has put into to Newsom. And then thirdly, you have big tech, and that wasn't a factor 20 years ago. Big tech has come in hugely. Now these are very wealthy elites that don't have to worry about lack of water, bad schools, or crime because they live in gated, guilted neighborhoods. So with that element, then the Democrats nationally have pulled in a lot of really big money from the Democrat Governors Association. So altogether, pushing north of $80 million, and Republicans maybe had a couple of million. So it's been a financial tsunami.
For what the recallers could raise and versus the Governor Newsom, was there some numbers that recallers could raise?
Yeah, the candidates running against were limited to $9 million if they got a favorable ballot statement. Newsom, on the other hand, had no limitations at all, and he's proven it. So this was a battle that, frankly, if Mother Teresa was running against Newsom, she would have lost. Because with that kind of money, you're talking about complete media saturation. And that means every time you turn on the radio, every time you turn on the TV, you look at a newspaper, you turn on the internet, all you see is Newsom, 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 and fear, fear, fear. And it's very effective. So money just doesn't talk in politics. In this case, it swears.
I just wanted to add, I think it's interesting about the money aspect that we're talking about. I wanted to ask you, Sean, do you think that Larry Elder has done significantly well considering his funding limitations? Or do you think that he could have done better for this campaign? What are your thoughts?
I think Ray turned out to be a spectacular star. I mean, he has energized people. It was pretty lackluster field until Larry came in, and he's so articulate. He says so much. He's a libertarian, a conservative, African American. He's unafraid. He says more in 1 minute than most human beings can possibly do in 10 times that amount of time. And he's something that really shook the Democrat liberal establishment. The last thing they needed was a black conservative getting elected California. And that's why George Soros, he's a billionaire, doesn't like America, was literally a Nazi collaborator in World War II. That was on 60 Minutes. George Soros put in $1 million himself personally. So when Soros is putting that kind of money in, that's pretty serious. Democrat Governors Association pumped in millions of dollars on this. So it was clear the decks. And even then, you're going to see the polls tonight tighten. the early vote is what the Democrats are excited about, is what Newman's excited about, and he just had his own press conference, patting himself on the back. But you're going to see these polls tighten up because there's a lot of people that have been voting today, and those votes will be counted later on tonight. Look at the ballots tonight at 11 o'clock. And thereafter, you're going to see this shrink much tighter. Already 20 counties have voted against Gavin Newsom. That's the early vote. But as the time goes on, remember, all of our Republican candidates in 2020 were losing this time to just 10 months ago. But around 10, 11, and 12 o'clock, they started winning. So it's the live, we call them the live voters, the people that show up at the polls, that cast their ballots face to face like we used to. Those are the ones that are going to make the difference. And we're seeing, I think you're going to see a greater tightening. I don't know if we win. I think it's unlikely because of the tremendous amount of money. But still, it's going to show that Gavin Newsom's got a black eye on this. He's looking bad. He's become kind of a laughable character. He's hard to take seriously, but it also shows that even in the bluest of all states, there's real competition here.
Some residents in those states voting against Governor Gavin Newsom, even in the deepest blue counties, like you just pointed out. Very interesting. And also you pointed out that he's an African American. That's the last thing that the Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom wanted to face, because they're so for pushing identity politics and using the race card. But we know the way Governor Gavin Newsom has tried to paint this recall election as a Trump supporting, crazies going out there wanting a recall. I mean, do you think that with the way Governor Gavin Newsom has dismissed this by connecting it to former President Trump, do you think that has gained him some success, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's always a campaign of fear. When you're an insecure politician, your best friend is fear. Try to instill and try to resolve that. Now, there's real fear. When you go to the grocery market, many people, particularly in the inner city areas and urban areas, have to wonder if they're going to get home safe. There's fear that if their kids go to school, are they going to get home safe? Are they going to learn anything? Are they going to be are they going to have to go through some endless propaganda? There's really fear because just to get a decent job in California, because the housing is so limited and it's very, very expensive. There's fear whether or not they're already talking about water rationing, and that we're going to be able to, we're going to get penalized $10,000 a day if we use too much water taking showers and washing our dishes. So there's a perniciousness in California that a lot of people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. On the other hand, if they can make them afraid of some kind of a boogeyman, which is preposterous. Larry Elder, for example, they've been attacking him because he's clearly the most popular and he's getting millions and millions of votes. He's an African American, but he's also a libertarian. He's not a Trumpian. He thinks differently, he acts differently, but that's the smear word that seems to be working in California, and that's what they're working on and trying to get resolved. The best news is this: Newsom's going to do worse than he did in his election campaign 3 years ago. That's the embarrassing part. Newsom is definitely going to be losing on the margins because millions of people are voting against him. You're going to see a polarization in this state where the north and the east part of California is against the coast. The wealthy the wealthy elites are on the coast, but they don't have to deal with the inner city problems.
Important insight there, Sean. So speaking of where we're getting in some of the details of the areas, we have some new updated numbers for you on how this vote is going so far. So in Los Angeles, we have 76% of people are voting no to the recall right now.
And Larry Elder is actually leading. He's leading in Los Angeles, and he's leading across the state. And then we have Kevin Patra, the Democrat YouTube star that's following him.
And also, so we're going to visit Orange County again, because this is where one of our reporters is now stationed. She's at Larry Elder's, hopefully for Larry Elder, his victory party. So we're going to check in with Jamie, one of our reporters at the Larry Elder victory party. Hi, Jamie. How's it going out there?
Hi, doing well. How are you guys holding up?
Kind of calm? Are people excited? What's the feedback you're getting over there?
There's a lot of energy here, and there's also a wide range of ages as well of people that we have spoken to. we actually just caught up with a 21-year-old who was canvassing for Larry Elder, and he said the young people, especially in the Latino demographic, have been very, very energetic and eager to get out there and cast their vote today. So it is very lively. The night is still young. We just had the 48th Lieutenant Governor who just spoke to the crowd, Abel Maldonado, and he said it is still too early to call, and they are still holding on to hope.
Do you feel like, what are your thoughts personally, having covered this recall over the past couple of months? Are you surprised by the early results that we're seeing right now, or what are your thoughts on these results so far?
Yeah, so far in Orange County, we have the first round of unofficial in-person results in Orange County are showing 57.95% are voting no, with 42.05% voting yes. So it is still a bit early in the night, but right now it does seem like California Governor Gavin Newsom will retain his seat. But again, it is election night and anything can happen. But so far in Orange County, here at least, people are very energetic and are holding on to hope.
Have you seen Larry Elder in there yet? How's his attitude? Have you been able to catch up with him?
Larry Elder has not addressed the crowd as yet. They did open with a prayer from Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, Pastor Jack Hibbs, and he was one of the churches that defied pandemic restrictions last year and kept his church open, and has been canvassing as well for Larry Elder, urging his congregation to vote yes on the recall.
And how much of this recall, Jamie, since you have been reporting on this, how much of it has to do with the churches being shut down? I've seen a big impact with churches coming in and collecting. Actually, I've seen booths in front of churches collecting signatures for the recall.
Yeah, actually, I believe it was Harvest Church who won a lawsuit against the state, citing, that the pandemic restrictions against churches were unconstitutional, and they won, and California Governor Gavin Newsom had to pay those settlement fees. So under no circumstances in California can, regardless of if it's an emergency order, can the state lock down churches again because of that lawsuit that went through.
Well, thank you, Jamie. We'll check in with you throughout the night.
Okay, thank you, guys.
All right, so now we're going to continue on updating you with other counties, other big crucial counties here in California. So we have the latest numbers from San Francisco with 87.8% voting no to the recall. They would like to keep Governor Gavin Newsom in office so far, with 12% voting yes. That's in San
not a
Francisco.
surprise, right, from San Francisco. That's something you could easily assume. And we can move on to Alameda County. There's over 60% are saying no, and there's 15% that are saying yes. 85% are saying no to the recall, and then 15% are saying yes. And these Northern California's counties are pretty much, for the most part, saying no to the recall. We have Santa Clara County, Sacramento County, and Contra Costa County. All of them are saying no to the recall.
So actually, speaking of this right now, Governor Gavin Newsom has just called the race. I wanted to ask you guys, Craig and Sean, sorry, what do you think about this? Do you think that it's too early to call, or do you think Gavin Newsom is making a good call here?
Well, it sounds like Mr. Newsom is a very confident man. I would say that he does have the leg up. On the other hand, it could be interesting to see how Orange County and other counties perform on behalf of Larry Elder and the recall question. But Sean pointed out very, very brilliantly, very accurately, that money speaks very loudly. In this case, it's screaming loudly. And also, they were very clever. The Democrats used Trump as a drum, and they beat that drum very loudly. And that really turned, I think, a lot of people against the recall exercise. And they were clever about that. So what's happened here now is you'll see the unions and all of their friends ginning up the vote, and that's coming through for them. And the one thing that they had to do, though, that the Republicans didn't have to do, they had to spend $77 million, probably north of that, to get where they are today. Republicans spent a fraction of that, maybe a tenth. So this is not necessarily a shockwave, but it is a jab to the belly, because they had to bring out all their big guns, and it gave Gavin Newsom a scare, and for good reason. People are still upset.
We're seeing 20 counties now that have already in the early vote. This is the early vote. That's not even half the vote has been counted. That have already committed against Newsom. I think that's going to grow. It looks like the entire north of California has, from San Francisco north, is voting against Newsom, but also the Central Valley, which is heavily Hispanic, heavily farmed, but has been damaged by the drought because we haven't built a reservoir because of the crazy extreme ecologist in 40 years. We don't have water retention. We have twice the population, but we don't keep water. And California has always been a desert. It's been that way since long before we discovered climate warming. So the key is that the farmers, the folks that earn their living in the Central Valley, they're seeing what's going on. I think you're going to see a shift in Orange County. I think you're going to see a shift in other counties. That more than half the counties in the state, well, so far, more than half the counties have voted against Newsom. 20 is of, that there are 58 counties. So we're getting close to that point. You're going to see the margins shrink. Every single vote tonight that we're coming, in every single county, the margins are shrinking. The Democrats, I should say, Newsom had, over 70%. Now it's below 70. Now you're seeing it 66, 65, 64. And so as those margins get closer, as the later voter, the people that showed up at the polls when those votes start coming in, I remember my wife is a congresswoman for Newport Beach, Huntington Beach, and we were losing until 11 o'clock at night. And I remember our campaign consultant took the laptop and slammed it down, because when the same day voters started, those votes started coming in, she was behind, 10 points and 6 points and then 4 points. And then finally she was behind 400 votes, and then when she got to be 300 votes ahead, it kept growing and growing and growing. So the same day voters is what's going to change the outcome. Right now, if you're Newsom, you're happy.
How long do you think we're going to have to wait before that margin gets closer and closer? Sorry, you said 11 o'clock?
Yep, got to wait till 11 o'clock. Takes a while to count all these votes.
Is that your cutoff? That's when you're gonna
Then I'll give you the call. Yeah.
Is there a difference you see in this, what's happening now versus 2003? Is there a major difference in the state?
In 2003, yeah, there's a lot fewer conservatives. California has been an out-migration state for 20 years, and there's a reason for it. And it's not the wealthy that is leaving California. There's a lot of businesses that leave and a lot of businesses that don't expand that leave. But what's happening is that the children, our children, they cannot afford the homes in California they were born in. They grew up in nice neighborhoods like La Pazuena, Pico Rivera, La Cañada, San Diego, and now those homes are unaffordable because the jobs don't exist unless they're part of that high-tech elite with Google and Amazon and Facebook. And most of us aren't. That's a very elite group of people. They live in insular lives. They live in nice, perfect neighborhoods. They got great cars. But the 80% don't have that. So they're finding opportunities. Young families, young people with families are leaving in droves. By the way, that's not good if you want young people in a state to populate it. So that's what's changed since 2003. Yes.
Well, Sean is waiting. He's calling it at 11. Governor Gavin Newsom just gave his victory speech for the race. So let's take a look at what he had to say tonight after he himself called the race.
Conservative parts of the state, progressive parts of the state, folks that I know were going to vote no, and folks that I knew were going to vote yes on this recall, and turned out to do just that. But one thing that's universal, everybody wants to be respected. Everyone wants to feel some connection to one another. And we all certainly in this pandemic want to feel safe, protected. And those are universal values. And I think about just in the last, few days, and the former president put out saying this election was rigged. Democracy is not a football. You don't throw it around. It's more like antique vase. You can drop it and smash it in a million different pieces. And that's what we're capable of doing if we don't stand up to meet the moment and push back. I said this many, many times on the campaign trail. You know, we may have defeated Trump, but Trumpism is not dead in this country. The big lie, January 6th insurrection, all the voting suppression efforts that are happening all across this country, what's happening, the assault on fundamental rights, constitutionally protected rights of women and girls. It's a remarkable moment in our nation's history. But I'm reminded of something, I don't know, a few decades ago someone told me when describing a difficult and challenging moment, said, the world is too small, our time is too short, and our wisdom is too limited to win fleeting victories at other people's expenses. And he went on to say, we must all triumph together. So in that spirit of recognizing and reconciling this moment, in trying to understand, not just here in this state, but all across the United States of America, I just want to say this. Tonight, I'm humbled, grateful, but resolved in the spirit of political hero, Robert Kennedy, to make more gentle the life of this world. Thank you all very much, and thank you to 40 million Americans, 40 million Californians, and thank you for rejecting this recall. Good night, everybody.
All right, well, that is one victory speech there. We're going to have a quick break, and then we'll come back and speak with you soon.
Welcome to NTD and Epoch Times special coverage of the recall election in California. Melina, we actually just saw Governor Newsom's victory speech. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that he really was, in one sense, he was saying he expected this, the results that we've gotten so far. He's saying he expected those results pretty much at the beginning. So he's already showing his confidence there, I think, with that. But then I also think there was an element of, he was being a little inspiring, trying to inspire Californians and saying that we need to come together. This is not a time for division. So these are the things that I picked up a little bit from his speech. What do you think? Yeah, and it actually was encouraging to see that he's acknowledging that there is a group of people in California that are not happy with him, and he wants them to work together. But at the same time, unfortunately, I felt like he branded these people, and he criticized them, and that was the negative part of it. But the positive part that he is acknowledging that there is a division in California, and we need to get together and solve it. Yeah, causing Trumpism, as he was saying. So acknowledging a little bit, there are people who are disappointed with him in California and some of his policies, right? But then at the same time, he kind of labeled and criticized another group, saying, labeling them as Trump supporters, Trumpism, right? He uses that term, so yes, he did. Very interesting there. And in the studio, we have Craig Kashishian, who's a pollster he was with the Reagan administration. And when it comes to polls, and it's a lot of times it's hard to trust the polls, but Craig has been great at doing these polls. What are your thoughts, Craig?
Well, it's going to be, I must say, a pretty good day for Governor Newsom. He survived a real scare, and frankly, he had to spend close to $80 million to do so. And Larry Elder was the result of that scare. Larry Elder was an electrifying candidate who understood the issues because he's so well versed with them, and he was able to take a boring field of candidates and turn it into a real, I must say, a race that put the Democrats on edge. They had to call in all the big guns from the East Coast to come out and rescue this guy. Otherwise, I think he would have failed. He would have flopped. And they also had to spend $80 million to save his hide. So that's what happened here. California is still a blue state. It has a big streak of libertarianism attached to it, but then again, dollars talk, and $80 million. By the way, the governor also sent checks out before the campaign and after this election. So money speaks very loudly. In this case, it's screaming.
Sean, for based on what you're seeing, and it seems like Governor Newsom campaigned really hard towards the last couple of weeks, and a lot of people came. The president came. We had the vice president come, and what are your thoughts on this? Do you think they actually took this recall very seriously? Did it get to a point where they thought they were going to lose?
Had to take it seriously. You had 2 million people sign petitions. Very hard to do. Very sophisticated statewide operation. It's a grassroots movement. That's, by the way, not going to go away. If anything, there's activities, groups, spontaneity, organization, people highly motivated. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a good opportunity to get ready for the real elections in 2022 in California. What he learned, what Newsom learned, is that 18 years ago, when I was involved in the movement against the governor, Gray Davis, is that Gray Davis didn't take it seriously. I was the one that personally served him with recall papers. Everybody left, including a lot of Republican leaders. I signed the first petition on the top line demanding his recall, and then we campaigned all over the state. It wasn't taken seriously. They laughed at it. All the political consultants thought it was a joke. It wasn't going to go anywhere. But when we got the signatures, they still didn't take it seriously. And so they've learned from their mistakes in the past. They took it extremely seriously, as they should. But Newsom turned out to be kind of an effete snob that people just don't inherently like. But they were afraid of the alternative because the money was so overwhelming. So Newsom and his company took it seriously. They took Joe Biden, who's underwater, who's really not popular. College students are laughing at him all over the country, and they brought him to California. Kamala Harris, who's even less popular than Joe Biden shows up. So it was kind of the crippled helping the crippled. But at the end of the day, the advisors behind Newsom knew what they were doing in terms of getting the right vote at the right time. Now, again, I think it's early. There's another 90 minutes. There's millions and millions of more votes to be counted. Only half the votes have been counted so far.
To ask you about, do you think moving forward, okay, I know you say you don't want to call the race until 11 p.m., but I wanted to ask you, I'm just saying, I mean, if you want to call now, then, I want to ask you a little bit about, do you think that the fact that they did have to take this recall seriously, and Governor Gavin Newsom did face this grim reality of possibly getting pushed out of office, do you think that this will change some of the ways he's shaping policy in the future, or what are your thoughts on how he'll move forward if he does stay?
He is beholden to the people that gave him the money. He is completely owned by the elitists, by the big unions, by the big money, and he's not going to deviate or change anything. If anything, he's going to become more arrogant. He's going to try to find new ways of screwing the middle class, because it's a war in California against the middle class. The middle class are inherently conservative, and the super wealthy and the people that are welfare dependent are the other coalition. They're the ones that want more government control. The super wealthy can control it, and the dependents want that income. It's the middle class that has to pay for all this, and that's why they're leaving California. So they're going to put the screws on, try to make it a lot tougher. But a lot of people realize that they have the power to make big changes. Now, this recall is beginning other recalls. There's a huge one coming up in Los Angeles County to get rid of the worst district attorney in America, Gascon. So that's one to watch. This is starting many other reactions against the hegemony that the progressives have over California. And so Newsom is not considered, or will be considered, a successful person or a successful governor. He beat back a recall. I will tell you, he did beat it back, but I don't think the margins are going to be very impressive by in the morning, when we see that the margins are narrow, and he's going to realize that millions and millions of people have no confidence. More than half the counties already have voted against him. There'll be more counties joining that line. A majority of counties in California will be voting against them. We're going to see a divided state, and that's the reality.
Again, Sean, this is a question for both of you. And one of the things that we have noticed is that the campaigns, so these candidates for recall have been campaigning for a while now, and they're highlighting all the issues that we're having in the state. Do you guys think that there's going to be a point where the Californians start connecting the issues they see with the government that we have here?
Was to demonize the electorate and focus on Donald Trump as his antagonist. That's what they knew would really energize their base, was to really bring out the Donald Trump specter and not talk about the issues that are really punishing the state big time. We talked about this with Sean. The water issue, the cost of living. You can't even afford to live in an apartment, let alone a house anymore in LA or in San Francisco. People are sleeping in their cars who have $100,000 a year jobs. That's how bad it's become. The homelessness issue, of course, the water issue, the farming families up in Kern and in the San Joaquin valleys are suffering. These issues are going to come home and scream very loudly, not to mention incipient inflation. Inflation is already here. The price of gasoline is $5 a gallon. Need I say more? These are matters that I thought would energize the recall election a bit more fervently, but the Democrats were successful in turning this into a referendum on Donald Trump, turning Larry Elder into a Donald Trump type clone. So.
Larry Elder, actually, his campaign manager, just released a video. So we're going to take a quick break and watch that video and see what they had to say about this race right here.
For everything you've done for Larry, he's so proud of everything you've done to help him come this far. Hey, it's just the beginning, right? We've got a long night ahead of us, and we got a long road ahead of us. So I just want to let you all know, Larry's pumped up, he's excited, he's going to be down shortly. So we'll have him down here. You'll be hearing from him in about 10-15 minutes. So
we just heard from Larry Elder's campaign manager on this issue. So we wanted to snap back to some of our guests here to continue speaking about some of these issues that we're seeing.
Yes, there have been people have been campaigning on issues and drastic measures to solve our problems in California, such as Larry Elder wanted to suspend CEQA. Sean, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think the people in California are going to start thinking about these issues?
Ways to think about it. You and I and everybody we know of somebody that's thinking of leaving California. I speak at campuses, I speak at multiple groups throughout California. That's one of the questions I ask. Who here's known somebody that's left California? Everybody knows. Who here, are you thinking of leaving California? And about half the hands go up. So that's the harsh reality. Many people are thinking about leaving, and so this is going to be a litmus test for other folks. Other people that want to stay in California, that want to fight for California, this is what we call a phony victory. Because what happens tomorrow and next week, you're going to see the homeless encampments grow. You're going to see your personal safety in trouble. You're going to see the good quality jobs aren't available. You're going to see the infrastructure deteriorating. And then you're going to see what the California Teachers Association are doing in the schools. So the quality of life continues to deteriorate no matter how you put it. So you can keep using the same line again and again and again, fear, fear, fear. The other side's going to do bad things to us, when in reality, California is not nearly the golden paradise that it was just a few years ago.
Yeah, so after all, you think that people are not connecting these issues, or is there going to be a pivot point where people are going to connect?
Remember, this was a short election. Remember how short it was? We didn't even know we had an election until early August. And then he decided to have most of the consultants, most of the politicals were thinking it was going to be a November election. So he made a smart move. He says, look, before anybody can organize against me, I'm going to put $80 million on the table. We're going to have an election September 14th before the other side can organize. It was a brilliant strategy. But at the end of the day, it's a phony victory. You know what? He's still governor. He was going to be governor anyhow, but he's a crippled governor. And his bona fides are greatly challenged. his credibility is out the window.
Now, Craig, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that people are going to connect these issues? Is there going to be a pivot point where people, as Sean is mentioning, that the standards, living standards are falling in California, and is there going to be a pivot where people are going to start seeing that in their daily life and they're going to take action?
I hope so. I hope this would have already occurred, but it has not yet, obviously. I think you would think that the cost of housing here, the homeless issue, the rising crime, the lack of police being funded would be motivators for people, but evidently it's not yet sunk in.
How, this is not happening not just in California, but also nationwide, and with issues, the way issues are presented across the nation and certain political infighting and things we're seeing. It seems like people are kind of blindsided and they're fed information, maybe told to think a certain way, or the media is not presenting full facts to them. I mean, why do you think that people aren't connecting these issues? We see there's homelessness up and down the streets here in California. We see there's certain issues with the housing issue, with the crime. So what's blocking people from seeing these issues and for what they are and holding the government accountable? What are your thoughts on that, Sean and Craig?
Well, let me take a stab. It's a low turnout election. Not everybody voted. Probably it might get up to 55, maybe even 60%, but it's considered kind of a lackluster election. So it's not presidential. It's not like, so who voted? People that are really committed. And let's face it, the public employee unions are very powerful. They are completely dependent on state government largesse. Many of them are making salaries of $100,000 a year. They want to protect that. They really want to protect their pensions. And so there's several million people connected to that industry alone. The middle class in California used to be professionals, aerospace workers. That's virtually disappeared in California. But let me say this. The union member today that works for the county, works for the state, making good money, they're the new middle class. So they're the ones that are replacing the free market middle class with the government middle class. So there's a lot of them, and they're doing very well, and they're not planning to leave California. So they were highly motivated to, what job in the world can you get paid full salary, full benefits, and not work? It's called the California Teachers Association. And they have several million dependents and friends and allies that are part of their coalition. So ultimately, they were able to harness their hardcore to turn out. Now, who do you know wants to live in San Francisco? And yet 80%, 90% of the people voted for Gavin Newsom. It's a despicable, dangerous, ugly, sickening town. And it's sad because it doesn't have the tourists that it used to have. And so there's a certain progressive type of mentality that likes a declining state. And I don't understand it except unless you're getting some kind of benefit from it. And they're getting enough benefits to keep them here.
Now, bureaucratic class, and Sean hit it quite nicely. California had a tradition of extraordinary diversity in economic engines. We had agriculture, we still do. We had aerospace, which was massive, entertainment, manufacturing, et cetera, and that's been displaced by high tech, and of course, the growth of these extraordinary unions and the incredible pay packages they're able to command. And that's displaced a lot of other folks and replaced a lot of traditional businesses. So they have a vested stake in Newsom's success because their lifestyle depends upon pay hikes, extraordinary governmental protections, et cetera, et cetera. So that is going to be the mainstay of the California economy, which is sad and regrettable, but they're more insulated than most of us are who are entrepreneurs and business people because they have a guaranteed income. To wit, teachers, they've been paid throughout the pandemic, full whack, right? Full benefits, and they haven't had really to work.
And many of them took vacations.
That's true, in Hawaii.
Vacations.
Exactly. We saw examples of that. Now, what's really sad is that a lot of lower middle class and lower class echelons, especially disparate minority communities like blacks and Latinos, who, let's say the Latina single mom has a kid in elementary school and has to tie down a job at the same time. Don't you think she should be upset or is upset at the fact that she has to babysit a child at home, make sure he's tied into a TV monitor trying to learn a lesson while she's trying to hold down a job? That child has been held back and that's going to cost.
From what you're saying, do you guys think the media had a role in this campaign and in this election? Do you guys think that media had a big impact? Because certain newspapers, they were very aggressive on fighting the recallers, like with a lot of opinion pieces against Larry Elder and multiple newspapers. Do you guys think that media has an impact on an election like this?
Inevitably it does. Media's changed quite a bit, but we have to include social media on that. And big tech, there's 4 or 5 corporations that really matter, and they are the most censorious body for information in the history of mankind. We've never seen such a sophisticated, large, powerful organizations that can control the information that you see. Facebook is a big part of that. And they will broadcast only what the minders, what the progressives in those big tech industries allow. And there's a lot that don't allow. For example, Los Angeles Times had a glaring headline just 2 or 3 weeks ago that Larry Elder is the black face of white supremacy. It's so absurd that this African-American success story who had went to Crenshaw High School, that had lived in the hood, that had graduated hood and went to college and speaks his mind, has written a dozen books, is made films, is accused of being a white supremacist. It is so stupid. It's Goebbels-like propaganda that you would have found in World War II. It's such a big lie. But again, if you say a big lie often enough and frequently enough, and you have people that will keep saying and spreading that big lie, it becomes believable. So a lot of people have been fooled and basically put into a stupor, thinking that something wicked and terrible is going to happen, and then they're going to get over the hangover, and in a couple of days realize, oh no, Newsom's still governor, and that's going to be the bad news.
Agreed. What's so sad about this is that if you add the 70 on top of the 75 million to 80 million that the Democrats across the country had raised for the Newsom recall campaign, the free media that they got, the exposure they got from the LA Times, who was, I think that paper was extraordinarily aggressive in its campaign against Newsom, not to mention other statewide papers and media outlets. Of course, you put that number conservatively over 100 million versus Larry Elder's 7 or 8. So 10 to 1 almost was the spending ratio advantage that the Democrats had over the Republican recall candidates. And as Sean said, they had to demonize Larry Elder and the California recall exercise as such in order to prevail. So they dodged all the big issues. They demonized a guy who is a hardworking newscaster, a talk show host, and in turn, they also turned this into a Trump referendum, and that was their winning formula for the state of California. Did you ever hear them talk about any of those papers, any of those commentators ever talk about the issues at hand? Not once did they have a debate, a robust debate on the issues at all. Not one.
Yeah,
not one.
They're labeling him as the black face of white supremacy. And I think that's very interesting because we know especially the far left wing of the Democratic Party has been playing the race card a lot with their politics. And it's interesting because it's like there's, at the same time they're saying they're trying to unify the country and unify and peace, and they're trying to bring, everything sounds very harmonious, but then at the same time isn't labeling someone exactly the opposite of what they're claiming that their goal is, labeling someone such as...
There's another point here when actually Larry Elder went to the Venice Beach and he was visiting the homeless encampment. He came under attack, and none of the LA government officials, besides the sheriff of LA, nobody actually condemned the attack. What are your guys' thoughts on that? It seems like our politicians, they are actually dividing us to a certain degree, and they're going by different rules based on who they based on their political thinking and belief, right?
There's two big features out of that. I lived in Venice. I served in Venice for 10 years. I call up. Served my time in Venice. I love Venice. Beach community. It's unlivable today. It is unsafe, drug-ridden by psychotic people that are running around that hurt other people. It's a filthy, disgusting third world, more dangerous than most third world places. It's a very toxic part. Larry Elder went there to point out this growing cancer called homelessness, aggressive homelessness, that we're seeing throughout California. He immediately came under attack. He was shot at with pellet guns, and eggs were thrown at him by a white woman in a gorilla mask. The visuals were stunning. The only problem is most Californians didn't see it. So that's what mainstream media and big tech does. It's such, if this had been a black Democrat and people were attacking him because of that, it'd be a national story. There'd be demonstrations. There'd be Floyd George. It would be days of protest. It would be mass arrest. But because he's a black Republican, this was not a newsworthy story. You didn't see it on Facebook. Particularly, you didn't see it on the mainstream media news. And it's such a huge, major, iconoclastic story. But the LA Times wouldn't cover it. The national media wouldn't cover it. And that's another way of censoring information. So basically, people didn't even know about this. Larry got enough energy going that people begin to realize, oh, there's this interesting libertarian, and he happens to be black, and he's running for governor. And that's about as far as he got, because it was a short election. The good news is, there is good news out of this. Larry is now a national phenomenon. He's going to be the most popular speaker in the next year. He'll be a major force in the 2022 elections. He's going to get a lot better known, and people are going to be a lot more comfortable, a lot more familiar with him. His radio show of 300 stations is probably going to double. And so the mainstream media and Newsom and their allies have done everything to get this guy down and keep him quiet and let's not the public see him. You know what? They got a cheap victory, but it's not an enduring victory.
We're talking about this is just the way that the disrespect that was shown in that act when they were disrespecting Larry Elder through that action. If you take race out of it, you take a black Republican, you take politics, everything. It's just a human disrespecting another human being is the way, it's just a disrespectful act. One of the things that's interesting that I noticed about the Republicans, the way they're campaigning for this recall, the way they were campaigning for this recall election is when they were interviewed and asked about their opponents, their Republican opponents, they wouldn't say any negative word about their Republican opponents. Now, of course, we know that this was probably a campaigning strategy for the Republicans. We can't set politics aside from this, but at the same time, it brings up the question: can politics happen in our society without being so divisive and without bringing so much disrespect into the political arena? Is that even
And was
possible?
it like that back in the day, or is this something new, or is it getting worse? What are your thoughts on that? You guys have been watching the political scene for many years.
Ronald Reagan had a belief, and it was the 11th commandment: thou shalt not speak ill of another Republican. And for many decades, and Sean can attest to this, Republicans running against one another in a primary would not focus on each other. They would focus on the themes and the issues and the policies of the day, and then go after their Democratic opponents. Today, it's internecine warfare. I think this campaign was slightly an improvement over that, but it doesn't at all remind me of the old days, the good old days. We've become very polarized in this society, in this political electorate, and that's not going to change. Sadly and regrettably, that's with us. So you'll not see the environment change at all until a major actor on the Democratic side starts to calm things down. We never saw things like Antifa and violence as precursors in campaigns like we saw last year. I think that's the sad part about moving forward, is that we don't see anybody dismissing that. Look what happened again with Larry walking down the street campaigning and somebody hurls an egg. The cops should have been all over that, but they were not. So I fear this is the wave of the future until major figures come to a Pax Romana and just calm things down.
What are your thoughts on this, John?
It's clear that things are getting a lot more tension-filled. There's more violence at hand. I'm sorry to say the progressives have put down the mark. We're not dealing with liberal Democrats. We're not dealing with moderate Democrats. They don't exist. Joe Biden campaigned as the moderate, the sensible guy. He has done more destruction in the last 7 months of any president in our lifetime. In 7 months, everything he's touched has turned very badly and it's getting worse. And he doesn't care. He doesn't apologize. I think he realizes, well, what he realizes is probably really little, but he doesn't care. He understands that he's not doing well, and he's just going to put everything on the table, and whatever his handlers want him to do, he doesn't care. That creates tremendous polarization in America. And when you have college students throughout the nation, in college football stadiums using chants against him, it's a spontaneous movement. When Joe Biden goes down the street, people are laughing at him and criticizing him. And this is happening on both sides. And until there's a moderate Democrat, a real one, and we haven't seen it. Joe Manchin's the best they got, and they're vilifying him on a daily basis. I don't see a good outcome by shooting guns, which a pellet gun. So today it was a pellet gun against Larry Elder. What is it going to be tomorrow? And this is what I fear. And the police have been disarmed. They don't have the effective presence anymore. They don't have the ability to have crowd control in Los Angeles. Every time Antifa shows up, they don't get arrested. They don't have any prosecution. They hurt people. Yeah, please do.
But Larry Elder actually just came out to give a speech, so we're going to cut over to Larry Elder and see what he has to say about it.
And we have Jamie. Yeah.
There she is, Gloria Romero. Gloria, let me say something about Gloria Romero. You know who Gloria Romero is. Gloria Romero is a Democrat. I'm hoping a recovering Democrat, but we'll see. She was the Senate Majority Leader. She crossed party lines. She's still a Democrat. Like my mother was still a Democrat. My brother was still a Democrat. I couldn't get them to change their party, but I got them to vote a lot more sensibly. Gloria crossed state party lines and supported my candidacy. Because of the issue of school choice. As you know, my opponent, Governor Gavin and Newsom, let's be gracious in defeat. By the way, we may have lost the battle, but we are going to win the war. Gloria crossed party lines because of the issue of school choice. We're spending $15,000 every year for students in our government schools in California. Notice I don't call them public schools, I call them government schools. $15,000 a year, some of the worst reading scores, some of the worst math scores. Only about 15 or 16 states spend more. And the students that are getting the raw end of the deal are the Black and brown students who comprise 80% of the government students in our government schools. They're getting the worst teachers, the worst principals, the worst administrators, the worst outcomes. What is the route from poverty to middle class? At least finish high school. One, presumably where you can read, write, and compute at grade level, and that is not happening. I read a study that said roughly 5% of government teachers across the nation are incompetent. Roughly 5%. I have no idea whether that's true of California, but let's assume for a moment that it is. There are 300,000 public school teachers in California. Any given year, 2.2 are fired. If it is true that 5% are incompetent, that means 15,000 are incompetent. 2.2 every year are fired. Again, I'm not saying that applies to California, but assuming it does, imagine if that applied to cops in LA. I'm in LA, 10,000 force. Assuming 15% were incompetent. Talking about 500. 500. Doing what? Planting evidence? Engaging in racial profiling? Using excessive force? We wouldn't put up with it. We'll put up with 15,000 incompetent public school teachers. That is why Gloria and I support school choice. So the money goes into an account, education savings account, that the parent can control, put the kid in a charter school, a private school, a religious school, or God forbid, homeschool. The reason we started this campaign is because this man, Governor Gavin Newsom, was sitting up there at the French Laundry restaurant with lobbyists who contributed to his campaign, with the people who drafted the mandate that they were violating by not wearing masks, by not engaging in social distancing, while telling you to do it. Meanwhile, his own kids were enjoying in-person private education. Now, he incurred a $12,000 wine tab. So, I don't know what they ordered, but I bet you it wasn't Mad Dog 2020. Crime up. Crime up. 41% in LA, and I'm talking about shooting homicides. Under this governor, 20,000 convicted felons were released early. What could possibly go wrong? The other day, former Senator Barbara Boxer was mugged in Oakland. You're not cheering for Barbara Boxer being mugged, are you? This is a rough crowd. It's a rough crowd. Also, I want to give some love to Arnie Steinberg. Arnie Steinberg, my strategist. Arnie, you were brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Also, Jenny Sand is here. Jenny, without you, I probably wouldn't have run. Jenny Sand, Pastor Jack Gibbs. Dennis Prager. Our chairman, all of whom invited me to run. But ultimately, I decided to run because I felt that I could do something about the crime. I could do something about the homelessness. I could do something about the fact that California has now hit $800,000 average price of a home. That's 150% above the national average. Outrageous because of the stranglehold the environmental extremists have had over Gavin Newsom and it had over Sacramento. Love you more. We have 5 seasons in California now, but this one is fired because of the poor forest management. Outgoing Governor Jerry Brown had a plan to clear 500,000 acres of fallen trees, dead trees, and dry vegetation. And our governor claimed that he cleared 90,000 acres, which would have been a drop in the bucket if it were true, but it wasn't. According to the LA Times, he only cleared 13% of what he said he would, which meant he exaggerated by a factor of 7. You know, before the pandemic, half of all 3rd graders in our government schools could not read at state levels of proficiency. Half. And those levels are low. Math scores even worse. 75% of Black boys could not read at state levels of proficiency. Math scores are even worse. Because I care about this, I've been called the black face of white supremacy. We're running out of water in California. We haven't added to our water infrastructure in 40 or 50 years when the state was half its size. It's not like voters don't know what to do. We passed bond measure after bond measure after bond measure for more reservoirs, to raise dams, for more underground water storage, and yet the water drains right out into the Pacific Ocean. There is a desert nation in the Middle East. It's called Israel. Because of desalination, they are now water self-sufficient. They have a little body of water next to them called the Mediterranean. We have a little body of water next to us called the Pacific Ocean. We can't figure this out?
No desire.
Rolling brownouts? Are you kidding me? Rolling brownouts. Because we're forcing utility companies to invest tens of millions of dollars into weather-dependent, unreliable sources of energy called wind and solar. A war on oil and gas. It almost takes an act of Congress to get a permit to drill an oil well or to drill gas. Many of the middle-class jobs, working-class jobs, they're all now gone. For the first time in our state's history, never happened before. What are we, 170 years old? I think, Arnie, you were there when it happened, right? First time in our state's history, people are leaving. A net migration out of California. I love the smile, sir. Net migration out of California. And when middle-class people cite as the reason for leaving, the number one reason they cite is they cannot afford the price of a home. Average price has just hit $800,000, which is 150% above the national average, largely because of the environmental extremists that allow people to file a lawsuit to stop any development project for any reason for an indefinite period of time. It is outrageous. And businesses are leaving. More businesses have left California this year. You left too? You're leaving soon? You're leaving soon? Yeah. More businesses have left California so far this year than have left all of last year. And the rate at which people are leaving California is nearly twice the rate that they've left the last 2 or 3 years.
That's where we lost the
There's a magazine called CEO Magazine. You know, I mentioned that magazine. Been around for 17 years. 17 years. They've had CEOs, the worst state in which to do business, based upon taxes, based upon spending, based upon the power of the public sector unions, based upon whether or not the state has a pro-business or an anti-business attitude. For 17 consecutive years, California has been determined to be the worst state in which to do business. Now, nobody cares about millionaires and billionaires, to quote Bernie Sanders. Highest state income tax in the nation, 13.3%. There are 40 million people living in California. 1% pay half of the state income taxes, and the state income taxes are the largest source of revenue. 1% account for half of all the state income taxes. So when a billionaire leaves California, he or she is taking that massive tax base with them, leaving less money for the things government is supposed to do. This is what we're facing. Rising crime, declining quality of our public schools, shut down the state to the point where a third of all small businesses are now gone forever. We've only recovered half of our jobs pre-pandemic as opposed to 2/3 of the rest of the nation because we're paying. Rolling brownouts, water shortages. Farmers in Kern County tell me now they are rationing water. I can't think of anything that this man has done in the last 2 years that success he deserves another day in office. However, we recognize that we lost the battle, but we are certainly going to win the war.
So we just watched Larry Elder's speech, and what's interesting to me, Melina, is that he's going again after the issues. It seems like these issues, he's reiterating what he's been saying throughout his campaign, and I believe that he's trying to educate the people on all the challenges that we're having, and continuing to show that there's a connection to the governor and to the people in charge. Sean, what are your thoughts on this, on the speech that Larry just gave?
I think the good news is that a lot more people have a very good idea what a conservative alternative would be in California. And I think there's a lot of doubt. This has been a progressive hegemony that's been controlling California politics and social life and media life and intellectual life and university life for some 20 years. And we lose a congressional seat. The roads are clogged with people leaving California. I was talking to Craig earlier about that. That's a fact of life. And we're seeing an alternative, a fresh light, a fresh answer. I have been in many political campaigns where it looked very dark and grim, and then a Ronald Reagan emerges. And then a Donald Trump shows up out of nowhere. And then you have Governor DeSantis of Florida showing up. So times might look really, really darkened, but I think this grassroots movement that had no money, that took on the most powerful establishment in the largest state of the union, has really set the agenda and has changed it. And the people that control California are no longer going to be able to take things for granted. They don't have, there's a sizable number of people, millions and millions, that are very unhappy with what's going on. And they're going to be a lot harder to be controlled. They're going to be objecting a lot more frequently. They're going to be voting a lot more often. They're going to be talking to their neighbors. And the best salesperson for that is Larry Elder.
Thoughts on the speech that we heard from Larry?
Well, the problems in California are for real. They're not illusory. Larry Elder understands them. He grasps them. He tried to share them with the state's populace, but evidently there's a disconnect between the pressures and problems Californians are suffering and the government they're now enjoying. There's a saying, and the cliche is true: the people deserve the government they elect, and they re-elected in this case, Governor Newsom for another year. So until the pressures and problems that we see throughout this state really hit home hard, you're going to see more of the same. Elder tried to offer an alternative, at least an alternative philosophy, and maybe that might be resonating, but it still needs to be absorbed. Obviously, it did not work out for Larry Elder tonight, but he will be around, and the problems that he just enunciated very clearly in his speech will still be around, and people will be paying the price for those problems. They have to live with bad schools, difficult job environments, homelessness that's rampant, unfortunately, rising crime, and a defund the police movement across the state where prosecutors don't even bother putting bad people in jail. So if Californians continue that sort of trend, it will be a Democratic rum state. If they wake up to an alternative, then we might have a competitive political landscape again.
So much, Craig and Sean, for joining us tonight on our special coverage. All right, thank you guys. So now we're just going to close up here in just a moment, but we're going to give you just the updated latest numbers from the race so far. So we have around 8.4 million votes have been counted. That's out of the 22 million people who are registered in the state of California to vote. Now, overall, the estimated number of early voter ballots is 61% of those early voter ballots have been counted. Now, of those people who have turned in their ballots and that have been counted, these are the final numbers for the night. 66.25% of people voted no on the recall. They wanted to keep Governor Gavin Newsom in office. 33.75% voted yes. Now, of course, who led this all, the candidate people voted for if they did vote to replace Gavin Newsom, of course, was Larry Elder with 42.2% of the vote.
Now, just some comments on California's future, you know, with this recall election and all the issues that we're facing. One thing that I've noticed in California, it's not that we don't have the talent. We have the talent, and we have a lot of different ideas. We have people from all over the world coming here and with a lot of different ideas, and it would be great to see these people working together. The Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian party doesn't matter, ethnicity doesn't matter, coming together, working together to make this place really good. And I think at some point in the near future, we're going to see that, the people coming together, working together, and solving our problems. Yeah. Thank you for joining me for this special election coverage, and thank you for joining us. Have a great night.